There's a Bible passage, there's profit in all labor. And all the podcasts I listen to right now talk about just put the work in.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have an expected outcome. Don't get so fixated on what the goal is, because you're going to lose sight of opportunities. You're going to lose sight of the journey and the process and what you're learning in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the real wins come from. That's where the growth comes from. 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is Adrianne Vangool, owner of Vangool Wellness here in Saskatoon. She is a published author, public speaker, highly respected physiotherapist and yoga therapist in the province, if not Western Canada. Also a former internationally ranked high-performance athlete in the pole vault event. We're going to get to that on the show as well. So let's start here, Adrianne. I want to go back, and I know you and I both have track and field backgrounds. Let me just rattle off some of the accomplishments here. So the Canada West Conference for University of Saskatchewan, where you went to school. You were a medalist at the Canada West Conference Championships 5 consecutive seasons. 5-time medalist at the National University Championships, 2 gold, 3 silver. Incredible. 5-time academic All-Canadian, which adds to the overall great student athlete that you were. 3-time Canadian junior champ, set the national championship record of 4:10. Right?
Yeah.
PR 4:13 though.
4:12.
4:12.
But I'll take 13.
Take 13. Yep. National championship record's pretty awesome though. Pan American Junior Championships in Barbados in 2004.
Yes.
Okay. World Junior Championships as well.
Yeah.
In Italy. Member of Canadians national team. World University Games in Turkey, and I think there was a Francophone Games as well in Niger.
Africa. Yeah.
Yeah, in Africa. Incredible. And also found time to play 5 years of basketball or 4?
I only did 1 year of basketball university. Yes. Yeah.
It was tough to manage all of that, plus be in kinesiology.
Yeah, and the seasons were the exact same time.
Right.
So I constantly had to choose Can West track over playoffs for basketball.
Right.
So
It's interesting when you have athletes that do an individual sport like track and field and then also a team sport. Because I think you would attest to the benefits of both.
Huge benefits to both.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could talk a long time about that, but now as a leisure activity, I'm coming back to basketball.
Okay.
And playing in senior women's leagues. And then, there's benefits to both for sure. I love the both. Yeah.
I know for myself, it was football was great because I wanted to be part of a team that succeeded together.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed that me against the world's mentality of shot put and discus, which I did, one versus all. And if I win, then it's on me. And if I lose, it's on me.
Yeah.
Whereas a team, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah, a lot more pressure individually, which actually I think with pole vault prepared me for being a business owner. It's more, you can do business as a team too,
Sure.
Or you can be a sole owner. I did like that if I won, it was on me, and if I lost, that was my fault too. Yeah. So there's aspects of that. Yeah,
and great segue into the being a business owner, and we'll talk about that in more depth, but being a business owner, you are the sole owner of the business, and it's your responsibility to keep that business alive. So that is where the individual aspect of sports comes in. Yeah. But now you're leading a team as well. So you have to be part of a team, but also almost be the coach at the same time.
Yes.
So you're a coach and captain and player all within that same team. And so that experience in athletics probably helped that.
Hugely, and for me in ways that I'm still actually figuring out in terms of when I'm starting to mentor other people.
Okay.
Because so much of it I learned through sport, but didn't recognize that was a skill I learned. And so when I'm mentoring others into more leadership positions within our business, it's going back through, okay, that's not common knowledge. That's something I took from here or there. Right. And I just think mentoring and building the capacity within the business and leading others, it makes you a better individual. It's just like coaching. Like the really good athletes struggle to coach because it just came to them.
Right.
But if you had to work, like we're going to get into, and have grit and really try to understand the how and the why, you're a way better coach. And I think also a better athlete in the long run in terms of longevity too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good Wayne Gretzky reference there. He was the greatest player ever, saw the game differently, was not a good coach.
Yes. Yeah.
because he saw the game completely differently, from different eyes.
Yeah.
So is there, let me go back a little bit here. So Saskatchewan Sports Hall of Fame, we'll add that in there. And as if there wasn't enough accomplishment in sports, you got your Master's of Physical Therapy in 2010, and then started Vangool Wellness, the business, in 2013.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to know is, was there a straight line between your athletic past and then the decision to go into kinesiology, physio, and then into yoga, and then opening your own business? Like, do you feel there was a straight line there, connection?
No, and I love that we're talking about this, because I love talking about how this really, the different paths to where we are in terms of business. We all have different paths and journeys to it. So I think I had a seed of, I knew I wanted to do something in leadership. Just, I always was in leadership type positions. And I was drawn to it, the challenge of it. But I was going to do sports psychology and be a professor. And then I had this moment where I was studying, after doing a study and listening to the playback of the interviews, and it was a mixed method approach, but I was in a room by myself. And I thought, I can't do this. This is what my career is going to be. No. And so I applied then to nursing and to physiotherapy, and then I chose physiotherapy. And I had a kinesiology professor who was writing a recommendation letter for me, and she said, have you thought about medicine? And I thought, I could not do another 7 years of school. I was so burnt out. But now that's always a question I had. So it wasn't a linear thing. And just to shorten the story, I was drawn to start the physiotherapy business. When I found the way I practiced, there wasn't a way for me to practice the way I wanted to practice in private practice. So I created my own place to do that.
Okay. So it seemed to me like going from the athletics past at the University of Saskatchewan, obviously prior to that too, but at the U of S, and then being in kinesiology at the U of S studying, there was a bit of a straight line from athletics into physio. Like, you see a lot of athletes that go to college and they go into kinesiology. It seems like it's almost like the given to a certain extent. Where I want to know where things changed for you, Adrianne, is when the yoga and the yoga studying came in, and what inspired you there? What triggered you within that world, that realm, to now take what you've learned in kinesiology and physio and now translate that into yoga?
I think it started with my personal practice and I retired from sport. And like so many people, when you compete at a high level and then it's gone, there was this void. And also I was burnt out. There's a lot of other things I was working through mentally, emotionally, with my experience as an athlete as well. And yoga was a practice I was drawn to because it spoke to my mind, my body, if you're into spirit, but it got me calm and introspective, and it helped me through a transition period. At the same time, I was in physio school, and the two, as I was training to be a yoga teacher and in physio school, the two have always been kind of blended. And the two, I was drawn so much to the whole person health as opposed to just the physical aspect. I was so immersed in the physical with kinesiology, and I was so curious about what is this regulating of a nervous system. Like, I did lots of the visualization and the breath control to perform well in pole vault, but I didn't actually understand what was happening. And I started to get the why in a deeper level through the yoga practice. And then I understood it better because I was diving into so much physiology and anatomy in physio.
Was it tough to balance the attraction and the study of, getting your master's in physio and therapy, and then adding the yoga in, or did it kind of just nicely work together?
I would say it nicely worked together, and yoga helped me get through the program as well, in terms of it was a practice that helped me. When you're going so hard, your nervous system is taxed so much when you're going through learning at such a compressed program, that I found the yoga practice rejuvenated me and made my mind work sharper than going for a run did. Like, there started to be a diminishing returns on the other ways that I used to regulate my body. But like anything, I always dive 100% in. So I probably did too much intensity.
I think that's like most athletes. So I mean, you're all in or you're all out.
Yeah, so I was all into yoga and I was all into physio, and I didn't do track or other activities for a long time.
Yeah. Considering the origins of yoga, which obviously goes back thousands of years, what I've noticed, at least, well, especially in the last 15 years, 10 years maybe, is that it's become far more ubiquitous, meaning it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Far more acceptance of it. It's not all this kumbaya that people might have thought it was back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And getting into the late 90s and even into the 2000s now, for sure, I'm noticing a lot more professional athletes, NFL and CFL football players, high performance athletes using it as a tool.
Yeah.
And like you said, and I can relate to it in that our sport was always about the physical, and how to improve the physical part of us. And if there was any mental, it was more visualization. That's really the only mental part that seemed to come into it. There wasn't a lot of talk of taking care of yourself internally from a mind and wellness perspective.
Yeah.
So what have you seen in terms of, that acceptance I mentioned, and the types of athletes, or even just the types of clients you're getting at the clinic?
It's a great question. And I think it's shifted. There's been enough years now where there's evidence-based to support it. I mean, I remember teaching yoga to the Rough Riders during their camp years ago when they came to Saskatoon. It's not seen as a religion anymore. I think there was this tie to it being a dogma and dogmatic. And it isn't. It's less so now. So I think a lot of that's culture. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the benefits of it, it's kind of being diminished because people are getting a watered down effect, and it's one of the downsides of it being popular, but also it's more palatable to people, and it's not this, odd thing that's happening over there, and why are they breathing that way? But I think it is a system and a science, is the way it was described to me, that incorporates the whole person. And it's not a religion, but it helps you to use tools. So some people bring their faith into it, and that's great. But it's not about worshiping one thing or something. It's about the human experience, and it's about each individual's human experience. And I think, to your point, I think a lot of CEOs use a lot of aspects of yoga through meditation and other breath work to maximize their capacity. And the same way that I think high performance athletes use it as a recovery, but also it just helps you to maximize this human body and regulate it so it keeps being able to do what you want it to do, both intellectually, physically. It works every body system. And so that's why I think people use it, because it works.
I'm going a bit off script here, but I want to ask you, how much do you think that the mind and the brain and the internal cerebral wellness that we have is critical in healing?
I think it's the core of everything. Okay. And I'm going to, speak to something that I want people to look more into, not just take the sound bite, but for instance, pain. I work a lot with people in pain, and whether it goes into chronic or other, pain is something that is in the brain. And it's not that it's all in your mind and not real, but pain is in the brain. And that's just one simple way to express. And we all experience pain in different ways. And I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of went off track there, but it's, if I can speak just really one thing, it's because of the nervous system and the way that is tied to our unconscious and our conscious. I think that's also why it's so influential. And the nervous system doesn't just tap into thinking. The nervous system feeds into everything that happens in our body, sensation, motor movement, and I think that's one piece. I
think there's something to be said for not just positive thinking, but thinking yourself into a more healthy state. Like, I mean, obviously you can't just sit there and eat Cheetos all day and then think yourself into a healthy state.
Yes, yeah.
But I think there obviously is something to be said for that mindset. So here's a good example. There are many different ways to heal yourself. For example, massage therapy, physiotherapy, acupuncture, chiropractic. Everybody seems to have their thing that works for them. And I think largely because they believe it works for them. So for example, I'm not a huge fan of chiropractic, not that it doesn't work, I don't feel it works for me. Other people might speak to acupuncture, for sure. It's like, I think it works for me. Other people go, it doesn't work. Same for physiotherapy, maybe massage. There definitely is that brain-body connection between if you try something that is supposed to heal you and you don't think it's going to work, it probably won't.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So the mindset's huge, and I like to think of it in terms of embodiment, and that's a trendy word, but what I mean by that is, stay with me. Our nervous system is always scanning, am I safe? Unconsciously. And if there's something in the environment from past, from whatever that is, no, it's not safe, then our nervous system goes towards the sympathetic, which is that little bit of hypervigilance. And so if we're going into something and we're like, I don't know, we're not open to it, right? It's going to be, we're not going to receive it. But also healing happens in the parasympathetic nervous system, in the I'm safe and I'm okay. And I often say to people, whether it's a belief we have or being believed, both are critical. And if I do anything with somebody when they sit down, my main role is to believe them. And their story, whether I agree with it or not, whether I understand it or not, it is true for them. And that's the best way we can alleviate suffering and move towards healing, because it moves towards, I'm not fighting to be heard. I'm not fighting myself. So some of this is internal and some of this is external too.
I love that. I love that. Helping someone, like just believing them, because that takes down the first wall almost, right? And it allows them to feel safe, as you said. And I think back to some of the speaking presentations that I've done, and one of the slides is on Maslow's hierarchy, and what the base is just food, water, shelter. The second one is safety. Safety,
exactly. I show that same slide.
Right? I love that. I know. I feel like, you know, and when I talk to business owners and leadership teams about their employees, I show them that slide and I said, well, you assume that they have food, water, and shelter. You assume that. You can't assume it, but you assume that they've taken care of that themselves. But I said, when they come to work, I said, it's much like when I was teaching. And when the students came to class, a lot of those students were coming to class to feel safe. As opposed to being at home. Some of your employees are coming to work to feel safe, as opposed to being in the home life of the, you know, we don't know the backstory there. And I think the business world is, I don't know if I want to say too slowly, but at least slowly moving towards having a more empathetic culture, and companies being more sympathetic and empathetic to their employees' needs. And I think that's critical for a company's longevity. I think it's important. I mean, we can't be thinking the way we used to in the 50s, where it's like, I'm giving you a paycheck. You need to be sympathetic to everybody and kind of for there to build that culture that everyone feels safe in and will be productive in. And that's the critical part. So I did some reading on your background, and let's get back to the yoga thing, because I'm really interested in it. The first time I tried yoga, it was brought to our school at Holy Cross. I was teaching, and they just said, "Do you want to try this?" And so I did it, and I actually quite enjoyed it. And this is back in 2000. I have done forms of yoga through Centergy and other things at the gym that I attend. I really do quite enjoy it. It's not something that I've fallen in love with yet. But the irony is that when I do it, it's like, man, this kind of feels really good. Yes, and then I'm like, I probably should do this more often. But I don't.
Fair.
Having said that, where did your journey start with yoga in terms of maybe your teachers, your instructors? I had a couple of names that I was able to pull out, like Joe Pereira, Srivatsa Ramaswamy.
Srivatsa Ramaswamy.
I'm glad I got that really close. So where did that journey start for you? Because obviously that is its own individual journey, although it ties in nicely to the physical therapy. But when did you take that to the next level?
When did I take that to the next level? I think it was when I took the therapeutic yoga training in San Francisco. And to me, that was the first time that it went deeper than the physical. And not to say, people watching this are probably like, what? And not to say that the other aspects, the other trainings I did, we did lots of breath work, we did lots of meditation. But I think that training spoke to me more in a way of, they taught to people that, and it was for people that are in pain or have injuries. It was more bridging towards healing and teaching to somebody with cancer, or how would you make it accessible? And that's when it spoke to me more than just teaching to Adrianne, but teaching to the clients that I might work with in physiotherapy. So I think that's when it bridged. And it was gentle and it spoke to the nervous system in a different way. And I think I experienced a level of, therapeutic nature that it didn't experience, the athlete didn't experience, because at that stage when I was learning, I was still quite in my athlete temperament.
Right.
I was going to yoga and doing, I was, one of those people in class doing handstands. And it's like, it was still adrenaline focused for me. Whereas the therapeutic was, we were laying on a floor for 90 minutes doing different supported postures. And I was like, what? And I felt euphoric. Yeah. And that's when I first experienced, this is what it is when it's not just a athletic gymnastic type form of yoga, which is still okay. I'm not knocking it, but it opened my eyes to how to make it accessible and the other benefits that are there.
We're going to take a short break, and I'm going to feed this little guy, and we'll come right back. And we're back. I think something that you said, I thought of this. I think sometimes right now, especially in the world we live in with devices and phones, and that those quick dopamine hits, I feel like, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I would rather have you tell me to do something physical for 10 minutes than say, can you sit still for 10 minutes?
Exactly.
And that has become one of the hardest things for people to do, even if it's just sitting calmly, recognizing your breath, focusing on a spot on the wall, has become harder for us than ever before.
If we're thinking about, since we're going to keep this athletic analogy going, if we think about what we're training our nervous system to do, it's no different than training it to shoot a certain way, to position my hand a certain way in pole vault. We're training our nervous system to require dopamine hits every so often and things to be short, get to the point. Even just sitting and listening to somebody's story, like I'm finding sometimes I'm having a shorter attention span to hear somebody. I think our superpower, or the superpower that we can cultivate through yoga, is that, and that's going to create sustainability, because we're training ourselves to burnout. We're not training ourselves to sustain life. Right. And our brain, our nervous system does not evolve in this short period of time where it's going to be fulfilled from a short dopamine circuit. Right. And so what the tools of yoga help us do is to cultivate the capacity to sit still, to actually be able to crave and get that, crave the slow. When we can find it. And that's also when creativity comes, that's when solutions come. But are we even creating the context or the opportunity to get the solutions when we're earbuds in, and then we wonder why we're exhausted? Our hormonal system doesn't respond to that. And that's one of the greatest things that yoga has shown me, and what I'm trying to work with people on. And most of what I work with people on is slowing them down and breathing properly. And it's something I'm also working on, because I'm coming out of a bit of a burnout period of time. And it's coming back to my meditation practice. And where do I cultivate that when I'm raising kids and also supporting aging parents and running a business and trying to do all the things I'm supposed to do for self-care? You know, we all carry a lot of things, and it seems like we don't have time to slow down, but it's the slowing down what's going to sustain us.
Yeah. Which leads me to my next question. It's a great segue, is that running a business is, I believe, is one of the hardest things anyone can do. And one thing that pops up to me, there's one podcaster that I follow, he's a business owner in the United States, Alex Hormozy, and he says, more often than not, the stress that you're having are the conversations, difficult conversations you refuse to have, and the decisions you refuse to make.
Yes. I 100% agree with that.
I think about that all the time when I've got a conflict at work, when I've got a conflict even within my relationships in real life, or decisions I need to make. It's like the longer I put it off, like you even said that, you want to go from here to here.
Yeah.
And how do we teach people to stop avoiding those difficult conversations and decisions?
I think it comes back to this instant gratification of society with technology. We don't have to look somebody in the eye, and we are so avoidant of discomfort. And it's leading to what I see in the physio clinic with widespread, more like chronic pain conditions, to interpersonal things. It's not that we're lacking grit. It's like we don't know how to do it, and we're scared of it, and we don't practice it. You have to practice being in discomfort, and you have to practice, and you also have to know what you stand for and what's important to you. And the more I got to know myself, not in an egotistical way, but the more I got to know myself, like, why was that bothering me? Why? Oh, that's a niggle. Then I'm going to explore that. And is it something that I'm just uncomfortable about, or is it a value that I need to address with this person that's, not in alignment? So I think it's twofold: knowing ourselves, being aware, and then we need to not avoid conflict.
So we talked about this before the show, but if I were to make the claim, and obviously it's the name of the show, effort over results, which is something that I have taken to believe very heavily in over the last few years, that effort is the most important thing. It's what you get out of it because of what you put into it. And it sounds cliche, but it's more important necessarily than the results. It doesn't mean the goals aren't good to have. It doesn't mean that we don't want results. It just means that the result can't be the sole focus. Yeah. So if I were to claim, quote, effort is more important than results, how do you respond to that based on your experience, both as an athlete, because that's a different mindset, as well as a health and wellness provider? So let's start with being an athlete.
Yeah, I would say I was one of the kids that had to do effort. And like, I love to move my body. So I loved it, but I also was never, the pole vault, for example, I was not the most, I worked really hard, let's just say that.
Yeah. Well, that event demands it. Like, you don't just show up.
I don't have a gymnastic background. Right. And most people who do pole vault do. And so I had a lot of grit, and in academics too, in school, in elementary school, I was in remedial English. Like, I was never the smart kid. I was always the kid who had to work. But it served me so well later in life because I had a work ethic and I didn't give up, and I had a system of how I had to work. And so that was always me. It was effort over results. I loved the good results, and it motivated me to see the good results. But for me, the achievements were always empty, and they feel empty and without the effort. Okay. That's for me. I don't know.
So let me dig a little bit deeper in that, because you mentioned having to put a lot of work in, and once again, we understand the pole vault event demands that. But even just in sports, you had to put a lot of work in to get better. Even in school, you had to put a lot of work in to get better. But that messaging of may not have been called effort over results then, but parents, supportive parents, grandparents, a nuclear family, what was the mindset of the family when maybe you were in remedial English, when you're struggling in school and so forth? Because a child generally doesn't put the effort in without some guidance.
I think that's a really good point. I might talk with my therapist about. No, but my initial thoughts are, my parents, I was very fortunate. I do have a very privileged background and upbringing, and they didn't put much emphasis into the results. If I'm looking back now, they wanted me to work hard. They were supportive. They would take me to all the practices and stuff, but they weren't the parents on the sideline yelling. It was internally driven. They weren't like, we have this vision of you being this elite athlete. They're not talking about my medals. It was, they talked about me.
They were concerned with the whole person.
With me, yeah.
Are you a good person?
As Adrianne, not as how I performed. Yeah. Okay. So that's probably why I'm more effort focused.
Yeah, and I think too, when I do public speaking presentations on effort over results, and I talk to, even with employers, one of the first slides I put up is a picture of a small child, with a toy hammer, and the grandfather standing over them, showing them how to use the hammer. And it was those environments when we were growing up where we learned the most, where we felt safe, as you put it, to make mistakes, safe to try something without repercussions or failure, and someone who would take the time to be patient with us to let us learn. And that could have been an aunt and uncle, family member. It could have been a coach, a teacher. And I think when we all think back to our childhood, we have that person in each area: education, sports, what have you.
Yes.
let's jump forward now to business and owning a business, but even in the world of therapy and yoga, effort over results.
Mm-hmm.
How do you translate that into what you do now?
There's so much we can't control, especially we'll have an outline of what we would hope an injury to progress to. Mm-hmm. But I think about the individuals that have chronic pain. We have no control, a lot of it, what's going on, and we have influence, but there's a lot of, if we're given a chronic disease diagnosis, or no one asks to have MS, no one asks to have Parkinson's, it's not their fault. A lot of these things happen out of our control. So what we do each day is within our control, and we cannot control the outcome. And in a similar way to how the body and the physiology adapts, it adapts by what we do every little bit each day consistently. That then creates a shift or a change, even in conditions that can recover. And so even just this morning when I was talking with somebody, it's more about, can you stay in your 5 out of 10 window of tolerance consistently for 30 or 40 days, then you're going to see a shift in the chemistry of your brain, in the hormonal, in terms of burnout, the hormonal system shifts, nervous system shifts. Whereas you might see with muscles a change over 2 weeks. You see more, you can be tuned out and flex your bicep, and your bicep is going to get stronger. Yeah. It's not the same with the nervous system. Right. It's not the same for our hormonal system. Real change happens through sustained persistence over. And so I think that's the focus, is the effort in that, versus, like you said, to have a goal maybe to motivate you, but if that's the only thing, that's not going to help you show up every day when it's hard. So that's how I talk about it in terms of physio. Okay. And in the clinic.
Let's move towards the book, and because I imagine a lot of what we're talking about here is in the book. I've read through it, and it really speaks to me, because one of the things in executive coaching with CEOs, leaders of companies, leadership teams, is the importance of the health and wellness of the leaders. There's also a book, it's called Your Oxygen Mask First, and it's about the idea of take care of yourself, leaders, because how you show up to work each and every day immediately reflects on your employees and the teams around you. If you show up tired and exhausted, or upset and agitated and stressed because all you've been doing is working, you don't take time for yourself, that leaches into the workplace. Yeah. I had an interesting group of presidents, about 8 to 10 of them, large companies, the CEOs of these, and I said, what percentage of your week do you take for yourself? I said, not taking your kids to hockey, not even going out for dinner with your spouse. I said, just you alone. I said, maybe it's golf, maybe it's going to the gym, whatever it is, but just for you. And almost all of them was less than 5% of their week. Yeah. And that scared me a little bit, because I know it feels to me like that's what the old business culture used to, and it still is around. That's the old CEOs, the old owners. It's like, I work until I die. I'm going to die with my boots on. It's slowly changing. It is. And I think it's important for CEOs and leaders to take care of themselves. But getting back to you authoring this book, which is about self-care to we care, what does that truly mean? Because people have different definitions and iterations of what self to we means. So explain that, and how it maybe works within your field, but then also maybe within the business environment.
Well, I think the short way that I say it, I wrote in there, is we're human beings that are made of systems, like our hormonal system, nervous system, musculoskeletal system, and we live in systems. And how we think and act can change the chemistry of our body, and how someone else thinks and acts can change the chemistry of another's body too. So how we think and act doesn't just affect us, it changes the system of someone else's too. Just to your example, if your leader who's in a position of authority, who has, whether we say it or not, there's, just like our nervous system is scanning, we're acutely aware of who has control and who can make decisions. Right. Okay, it's just there. Yeah. Whether they're authoritarian leader or they're a great leader. We're aware of who makes decisions.
Sure.
And if they come in and like you said, there's this energy that's already saying I'm not safe. And that does something to my body, especially if it's somebody who has decision-making authority. Let alone if it's just somebody like lateral that you work with, that's still going to affect your physiological body. And so that's just the simplest way to explain this interaction. But in the healthcare field, that really has an impact if you're making decisions and diagnosing and really, I use that as an example, really having an influence on somebody's physiological body. But just in day-to-day, that's where I see it. And self-care is not necessarily a bubble bath. Self-care is not like going out for a drink and partying with your friends. I mean, that's fun, but that's something else. That's disassociating, distracting, leaving your body.
Right.
Self-care are actions and behaviors that regulate your nervous system. And that's what builds capacity.
Okay.
And so some of the presidents and leaders, maybe they are doing things, but I would start to ask them, I'm curious actually, are those activities actually regulating their nervous system and creating this physiological shift we need with dopamine, serotonin to build regulation and capacity? Or is it just more taxing the system? But it makes me happy, brings me joy and adrenaline. But is it actually, It's
all still energy. A lot of energy being put out. Yeah. So whether you're sitting at your desk and you're working your 60-hour weeks, or you decided to do something for yourself, so to speak, and go out and golf for 4 hours, which takes a lot of physical and mental too, it's still energy going out. Yeah. And so what you're suggesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that self-care isn't about distracting yourself from your work or your stresses.
It's coming into, and it's talking about discomfort. If you can't sit in your own discomfort, how are you going to sit in discomfort in conversations? And we need to regulate our own nervous system, self-care, before we can care for others. And so it's this circle. We're influencing each other constantly, but if we don't know how to regulate this, we are just going to be reacting, responding, or just making cognitive decisions that maybe aren't in touch with how we actually are leading nowadays and what people want. People want connection. Yeah. People want more from the workplace than just a place to clock in and out. Yeah. And if we can't be present with ourselves, we can't be present with others. That's the start of it. That's the cheapest thing we can do. You don't have to go to a workshop. Listen to this podcast for free. But like you can, but that's at the heart of it, are all these different tools to bring us into presence and sitting in discomfort with ourselves.
That's, wow. This is a major point, and I'm so happy you said what you just said, because this is exactly the message I'm trying to bring to the business leaders that I work with. And I'm hoping you can remember what you said. It had started with, if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't care about others. Did I get that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's really what I'm trying to espouse to these business leaders. It's like, you have to take care of yourself to be caring for others.
Yeah.
And that culture of caring, that culture of empathy. And there's a lot of business owners that think they care about their employees, and maybe they're putting their best intentions forward, but are there those connections, right? Understanding your employees each individually. But to do that, which takes energy, it takes a lot of mental draining, you have to take care of yourself first.
It requires emotional and mental intelligence and nervous system capacity. And most people's nervous systems are done. And so they're using other tools to try and make up for it and create systems that are based on this, and this is an algorithm for that. But it'd be a lot cheaper, but it's harder to do because it requires a different approach. And it requires what I talk about in the book, attention for change. And it's coming at it from not whipping ourselves, but like, I use loving, but maybe respecting ourselves, to being more whole and leading from that place of respect versus leading from a place of running from or away or a story we have in our head of what this thing is, And
it really, that really goes against the traditional corporate culture, business culture norms of how things should run in a company. Leaders, boss, employees, listen to me, do as I say. And I do believe in the past there were some almost people who were ahead of their game, ahead of their years, pioneers of what we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. But even more so today in 2024, especially after the pandemic, especially with the amount of social media that people are being inundated with, it's so much more important for people to, and I won't use the term unplug necessarily, but focus on each other. Mm-hmm. From a face-to-face value standpoint, and for leaders to be able to truly lead their and you know one of the things that business owners tell me their greatest challenge right now is the labor shortage, mm-hmm. or they talk about the Gen Z problem, mm-hmm. And I say to them, there is no Gen Z problem. You need to adapt because this isn't going away, and you have to learn how to be more empathetic, more caring. But to do that, like you just said, they have to change themselves first.
Yes.
That's very hard for a lot of business owners, especially those that are still boomers, maybe getting ready to retire, those in their 50s that are still thinking about how they were employed back in the 80s and 90s.
There's a lot of resentment. So I didn't have it easy, so you shouldn't, like, there's resentment, and that's again internal. And there's a lot of resistance to accepting that this Gen Z problem is going to go away. It's
if we fight it hard enough, it'll go away.
Yeah. Accept this is the truth of it.
Yeah.
Try and understand it, or you're going to be fighting against it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I imagine with you being a business owner, you already have the mindset. You already understand what it takes to lead people, and you do your best at it. I'm sure you would admit your mistakes as well. But is that an advantage to being a business owner who already understands what this is all about? Like, has it made running your business, I don't want to use the term easier, but has it allowed you to build a culture within your company that is just seems to naturally happen as opposed to having to build it?
Yeah. How do I say this? I think there's an advantage because it is authentic and it's not something that I'm performing, mm-hmm. or that we're performing, mm-hmm. or trying to start now. We've been doing this and I've made mistakes and stuff, and I've been on this path for many years. So I'm at this place now because I've worked at it for many years. And yes, there's some synergy with how I approach and how I practice. So, but it's also, I think for people listening, like, it needs to be authentic. It still needs to be authentic to who they are and their values. But there's a way to be more empathetic. There's a way to lead from a place that's more true to where we are now, that doesn't require you to abandon being authentic. Mm-hmm. And I think too many people think this is a quick thing too, like, oh, now I got to get with the times. And that's, again, still coming from fear of, like, I need to be this way now. Right. And it's like, do it your way, but you have to get to know you first. Before you know how you're going to present it this way, because this actually is true to my values. I can lean, and then people respond to that. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of this stuff, people are trying to, like most things, perform it, put it on top, and not do the real work, which is 90% of it, and what people see is 10%. Yeah. So I think that has been my process of just getting to know more myself, our values, like I said at the beginning, and then making it work that's true to us. Yeah.
Have you personally been requested to work with business leaders in the community? I know we're going to talk about public speaking in a second here, which obviously you would speak to groups, but have you worked with business leaders and seen both ends of the spectrum of ones that fight it and ones that are really truly embracing it?
Yeah.
I'm sure we still have enough light.
Yes, we're good. Yeah. Yes. So I'd say if they're inviting me to come based on the title of my book, they're more open to it.
Yeah, sure.
But I've worked with people more, I would say, where they've asked me to come and do a workshop about yoga and nervous system regulation. People are wanting this. Mm-hmm. People are open to it. I think there's a misconception that, like, look at you, 6'4", 5", ex-CFL, like, people wouldn't see you walking down the street and say, this guy thinks that empathy is important in the workplace. I'm not saying that, but like, if we're stereotyping, right?
First impressions.
Sure. So I think people are wanting this, and I think people are more receptive to it than we think, and I think it's the way forward. Otherwise, we're just going to be constantly dealing with struggling to find hires, struggling to connect with people, and it at the end of the day, it affects your bottom line.
Yeah. So let's get to the public speaking thing.
Yeah.
What have you been doing lately? What are some of the topics you speak on to maybe many different groups that are really important to you, and what do you like to speak on the most?
Yeah, great questions. The thing that's most firing me up lately is systems change, but making systems sustainable. So the thing that I'm speaking with people most on, a bunch of managers about, is how do we stay whole in a system that is unsustainable?
Right.
And I think a lot of these systems and workplaces are built upon requiring the individual to always be going outside of their capacity for the system to stay and hold and work. And so how do we start to create the system changes so that our systems are sustainable and individuals can remain whole in them? Yeah. And so that's the thing I like to speak about mostly, and a lot of it we touched on today. But it's not to put more onus on the individual person, but how do we create creative solutions and start to push back against the system that is requiring something that is not going to bring us forward.
Yeah. I would love to dig deeper into that. We're short on time, but I heard someone, it was the former CEO of the company I used to work for years ago, and he said, people don't fail, systems do. And I know he meant it from a business perspective, meaning you develop the systems that are flawless, and that way anybody you insert into that system should be able to succeed within it.
Right.
But I understand what you're saying. The systems you're talking about are much different. They're more internal, external. They're connections between people. I think it still all means the same thing, though, because we're all just people living within whatever ecosystem system, whether it be in business, whether it be in our families, whether it be in our group of friends, socially. There are systems that we either work well within or some we don't. And I think it's extremely important now moving forward, especially within the business community, for business owners to understand what that means. So it's not just the internal operational systems or creating efficiencies within the company to earn a profitability, because your people are your front line. As long as you have at least one employee, you need to create systems for you and them that work between the two of you, but also as a company. And so I think that's what you're speaking to, is that it's something a little bit deeper. So,
and are our systems rigid?
Yeah.
Or are they adaptable?
Right.
And I think what's happened is the systems got rigid, we've got our heels dug in, and they're not adapting. Yeah. And if, like we know in business, if you're not adapting, you're behind.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the mentality was, and still can remain to be, it's like you're either in or in the way, meaning we have a system and you either fit it or you don't.
Yeah, exactly. I think both. I think people create systems, and the systems shouldn't be having people always having to adapt to it. Like there's a synergy there. There needs to be a give and take.
Yeah. So let's finish with this, Adrianne. I touched on growth mindset and Dr. Carol Dweck's book and the concept of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So it is the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through dedication, effort, and learning, which I used to come from a fixed mindset background. I remember when I was teaching students where it's like, this kid's going to be a ditch digger. I hate to say that, but it's true. Like teachers make those judgment calls on kids.
Yeah.
But the growth mindset says, no, they're just not being given enough time, or they're not being given the right tools to succeed. And I think everyone can succeed in whatever it is they're trying to accomplish, given enough time and the proper tools, which is the growth mindset. So how does the growth mindset specifically speak to physical rehabilitation? Because if you have a fixed mindset, and we touched upon it earlier, but let's really focus on it now. A fixed mindset might say, I'm always going to be overweight. I'm always going to be in pain. It's in my family. It's genetic, which is a fixed mindset. You don't feel like you can break out of that history, past, what have you. So how important, and I realize it's a bit of a rhetorical question, but how important is growth mindset to physical rehabilitation?
Yeah, obviously it's cornerstone, but I think that's where the art of this is, and working with people is meet people where they're at. And oftentimes if that might be the initial belief they have. But if they are believed, and I just try and get to know what's the window in, and slowly show when there's small shifts and changes. And what I'm trying to do is show that things are malleable, and that I want to show them. Sometimes people get in that position because hope can hurt. They've been let down before. There's usually a wound there. And that's not my job as a physiotherapist to break that down. But when I see that, I have compassion for it, because I know that they don't want to be in pain. They are here because they want to get better. And that's the belief that they have for whatever reason, but to show them that the possibility.
Yeah.
And it gets the guard down. When the guard is down, things become possible. And then I often will say, I don't know what the goalpost is. I don't know, or like where the goal line is, but I do know that if we see change within a session, that's really great. Yeah. And then session by session, the guard's down, and then we see improvements. But growth mindset it's what we want. If we want change, it only happens through growth and discomfort.
Hey everybody, it's Quinn Magnuson here. I apologize. The last 2 minutes of my interview with Adrianne Vangool got cut off. What I want you to know is that you can actually find her book, The Journey of Self-Care to We Care, in most local bookstores as well as on Amazon. I would highly recommend checking that one out. It's an incredible book. I think it's great for parents, leaders, coaches, anyone that you're trying to lead, but also take care of yourself. Once again, thanks for joining us on the show this week, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.